The young billionaire walks into the bank and sees two poor twins in line. They say, "We came to ask for a loan to operate on our mother." But when he sees the photo they're holding, he's shocked. The afternoon sun bathed the First Republic Bank building in a golden glow as Darren Cole parked his Aston Martin in the premium client's spot. He straightened his navy blue tie, took a deep breath, and picked up the leather folder containing his mother's documents. 6 months since the funeral, 6 months of staring at that folder on his office desk. And only today did he find the courage to close his last financial tie to Elizabeth Cole. The bank was fairly empty that Thursday afternoon. Darren walked to the reception desk, where a woman in a pristine blazer smiled as she recognized him. "Mr. Cole, what a pleasure to see you again." Darren gave a brief nod. He didn't remember her name and didn't try to pretend he did. He rarely came to the bank in person. His team took care of almost everything. But to close his mother's account, he preferred to do it himself. "I have an appointment with Mrs. Preston." "Of course, she's been notified. Please wait a few minutes in the VIP room," she said, indicating a sleek space to the right. Darren sat on the leather sofa and opened the folder. The death certificate was on top. It still hurt to look at that cold document summarizing the end of a life in a few lines. The bank doors opened, and two young girls walked in. Identical twins with brown hair tied in messy ponytails, wearing simple but clean dresses. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old. One carried a crumpled, stained envelope. They held each other's hands, determined but clearly nervous. They looked around, confused by the formal environment, before moving toward the nearest counter. They were so small they could barely see over the counter, standing on tiptoes. "Excuse me," one called, her voice thin but firm. The teller looked around, puzzled, before leaning over the counter and spotting the girls. "Hello, little ones. Where are your parents?" "Our neighbor brought us," replied the one holding the envelope. "We need to speak with the person who lends money." The teller gave a condescending smile. "You mean the loan officer? Children can't apply for loans, dear." "It's not for us," the other twin explained impatiently. "It's for our mother. She's sick." The teller frowned, her smile wavering. "I'm sorry, but you need to come with an adult. It's bank policy." "But it's very important," the first girl insisted. "We heard the bank lends money." "Our mother needs surgery," added the other twin, her big eyes pleading, "and it costs a lot of money." From the VIP room, Darren watched the scene, intrigued. There was something in those girls' determination that kept him from looking away. "Mr. Cole," the manager, Rebecca Preston, appeared at the VIP room door. "Shall we begin?" "One moment," Darren said, standing up. He walked to the counter where the twins were still arguing with the increasingly uncomfortable teller. "Look, girls," the teller said as Darren approached. "You can't be here alone. I'll have to call someone to—" "Is there a problem?" Darren interrupted, positioning himself beside the children. The twins looked up, their identical brown eyes widening as they saw the tall man in a perfect suit. The teller immediately changed her expression. "Mr. Cole, sorry for the trouble. These children came in alone and they seem to have something important." Darren cut her off again. Then he crouched down to be at the girl's level. "Hello. My name is Darren." The two glanced at each other, as if checking silently. "I'm Sadie," said the one holding the envelope. "And she's Tessa. We're 6.5 years old," Tessa added, as though that established their credibility. "What brings you to the bank today?" Darren asked, trying not to smile at how serious the little ones looked. Sadie opened the envelope and took out a crumpled photograph. "We came to ask for a loan to operate on our mother." The simplicity and urgency of that statement struck Darren, but it was the photo that truly shocked him. He took the image that the girl handed him, and his heart skipped a beat. A woman of about 35 smiled at the camera, hugging the two girls in front of a modest apartment building. She had kind eyes and a bright smile that seemed to light up the entire photo. Darren froze. That face. There was no forgetting it. The torrential rain, the winding road, the car spinning out and crashing into the tree he trapped under the wreckage, calling for help. And then that woman, appearing like an angel at a broken window, using all her strength to pull him from the vehicle moments before it exploded. Nadine Rivers. The name shot back into his memory. "Your mother," he almost whispered. Is Nadine Rivers? The twins' eyes went wide in surprise. Yes, exclaimed Sadie. Do you know our mother? Darren swallowed hard. She saved my life 3 years ago in a car accident. Mama never told us, said Tessa, frowning. She was just passing by, Darren continued, the images of that night flooding back. She stopped when she saw the crash. She got me out of the car seconds before it caught fire. Darren felt the manager approach behind him. Mr. Cole, your appointment. I'll need to reschedule, he replied without taking his eyes off the girls. Something more important has come up. The manager glanced puzzled at the children and then at Darren, but nodded. As you wish, sir. Is your mother very sick? Darren asked, returning the photo to the girls. She turns yellow, Tessa replied. And she's very tired. The doctor said she needs surgery soon, Sadie explained, but it costs a lot. The insurance wouldn't cover it because it's a special operation, Tessa carefully pronounced the difficult word. Mama can't work anymore, Sadie added, lowering her voice. She used to clean houses. Now she's too tired. We heard that the bank lends money, Tessa said hopefully. Is that true? Darren stood up, suddenly determined. You came here alone. Sadie shook her head. Mrs. Patel, our neighbor, brought us. She's at the market buying medicine for Mama and will be back in half an hour to get us. Can you take me to your mother? Darren asked. I think I can help more than alone. The girls exchanged wary looks. Mama told us not to bring strangers home. Sadie hesitated. Your mother is right, Darren agreed. But I'm not really a stranger. She met me once, though she may not remember me. And I want to repay her for what she did. After a brief whispered conference between the two, Tessa announced, Okay, but if you try anything bad, Mrs. Patel from 3C will call the police. She's very fierce. Fair, Darren agreed, keeping a serious face. We can wait for your neighbor to return, or I can take you in my car, if you prefer. Is your car faster than the bus? Tessa asked. Much faster, Darren confirmed. Then we'll go in your car, Sadie decided. Mrs. Patel said it's okay if we come back alone if it doesn't work out. 20 minutes later, the Aston Martin parked in front of an old building on the east side of town. The contrast between the luxury car and the modest neighborhood drew curious glances. The twins led Darren up to the 3rd floor via a narrow staircase with worn steps. They stopped in front of a door marked 3B. This is it, Sadie announced, taking a key hidden under her blouse from a cord. The apartment was small and tidy, but signs of hardship were everywhere. A worn sofa, a table with one leg propped up on books, shelves made of wooden crates. On the refrigerator, only a few magnets holding children's drawings and a shopping list with basic items. On an improvised table were piles of bills stamped in red with final notice and past due. An older woman with graying hair appeared from one of the rooms, looking alarmed. Girls, you're back already. Mrs. Patel called saying... She stopped when she saw Darren. Who are you? Mrs. Bennett, Tessa quickly explained. This is Mr. Darren. Our mother saved his life once, and he came to help. The woman looked at Darren with obvious suspicion. They were at the bank, Darren explained, feeling oddly nervous under her scrutinizing gaze, trying to get money to pay for their mother's surgery. Good grief, Mrs. Bennett sighed, shaking her head. I told Mrs. Patel it wasn't a good idea to let them go to the bank even for a few minutes. How is Nadine? Darren asked. She just woke up. She's in the kitchen having some tea. The woman hesitated. Who are you, really? Someone who owes her life, he replied. 3 years ago, she pulled me from a burning car. Mrs. Bennett seemed to weigh his sincerity and finally nodded. I'll tell her you have a visitor. As the woman went into the kitchen, the girls pulled Darren to see a photo collage on the living room wall. It was just a few pictures taped directly to the wall, no frames. There were photos of them at various ages, some with their mother. Mama only keeps the best photos, Sadie explained. We had to sell the frames, but it doesn't matter, Tessa quickly added. What matters is that we're together. The soft voice from the kitchen doorway made Darren turn around. Girls, what mischief have you gotten into now? Nadine Rivers was far thinner than in the photo, and her skin had an alarming yellow tint. She wore a t-shirt 2 sizes too big and worn sweatpants. She leaned against the doorframe with obvious effort, but her eyes, despite the fatigue, still had the same brightness Darren remembered, a mix of kindness and strength that calmed him as she pulled him from the wreckage. When her gaze met his, she furrowed her brow, trying to place that face. Darren began, suddenly at a loss for words. "Mama!" Sadie ran to hug her mother. "We went to the bank to ask for money to pay for your surgery." "You what?" Nadine looked horrified. "And we found Mr. Darren," Tessa added, taking his hand and pulling him closer. "He said you saved his life." Nadine looked at him more closely, and then a flicker of recognition passed across her eyes. "The accident on the road to Lakeside," she said slowly. "The car caught fire." Darren nodded. "You pulled me out of there seconds before it exploded." "I just did what anyone would do," she replied, shrugging. "I was passing by and saw the crash." "You risked your life for a stranger," Darren insisted. "I never had the chance to properly thank you. You vanished as soon as the ambulance arrived." "I had to pick the girls up from daycare," Nadine explained simply, as if it weren't extraordinary to run off after saving someone. "Besides, the paramedics knew what to do better than I did." Mrs. Bennett cleared her throat. "Well, since the visitor doesn't seem dangerous, I'll let you talk. Nadine, call me if you need anything." With one last warning look at Darren, the neighbor left. Nadine moved slowly to the sofa and sat down. Up close, Darren could see the signs of illness, deep fatigue in her eyes, slightly trembling hands, difficulty breathing. "Girls, you shouldn't have gone to the bank," she scolded, but without the energy to sound truly angry. "And you certainly shouldn't have bothered Mr. Cole. Darren Cole," he finished, sitting in the chair opposite her. "And you didn't bother me. Actually, I think fate put us in the same place again." "Fate?" Nadine gave a faint smile. "Or 2 determined girls with a crazy idea." The twins exchanged looks that were part guilty, part proud. "We heard the bank lends money," Sadie explained innocently. "It sounded like a good idea." Nadine explained to Darren, "Since I got sick, I haven't been able to work. The bills just keep coming and—" She left the sentence unfinished, glancing briefly at her daughters. "And time is something running out," Darren completed quietly. Nadine nodded almost imperceptibly. "Girls," Darren turned to the twins. "Could you show me your favorite books for a few minutes? I'd like to talk to your mother alone." The two hesitated, looking at Nadine. "It's okay," she assured them. "Just for a few minutes." Reluctantly, the twins went to the bedroom but left the door ajar. "They're protective," Nadine smiled. "Ever since I got sick, they've taken on the role of caretakers. They try not to ask for anything, collect coins they find on the street, even tried to sell lemonade in the building." "What is exactly your diagnosis?" Darren asked directly. "Liver failure," she answered without beating around the bush. "I started with mild symptoms 8 months ago, but it worsened quickly. I need a specialized surgery that the insurance labels experimental." She made air quotes around the difficult word. "Without surgery." She glanced toward her daughter's bedroom. "How much does it cost?" "More than I could ever gather," Nadine sighed. "We're living off neighbors' charity. The rent is 3 months overdue. I've sold everything valuable we had. The girls even started saving coins in a jar to fix Mommy." She smiled, but her eyes glistened with held-back tears. Darren leaned forward. "Let me pay for it." Nadine blinked, surprised. "What?" "The surgery, the treatments, everything. Let me help." "Mr. Cole, I appreciate it, but—" "Darren," he corrected gently. "And please, don't say no. You saved my life without hesitation. Let me return the favor." "You don't even know me," Nadine argued. "I know enough. I know you're the kind of person who stops on a dark road to help a stranger. I know you raised 2 incredible girls who are brave enough to go to a bank to save their mother." Darren smiled. "And I know you deserve a chance." Nadine looked down at her hands. "I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," Darren replied firmly. "It's gratitude. It's balancing the scales. You pulled me from that car in the accident." He paused. "And you're here now. So it was worth it." Nadine raised her gaze, surprised to hear her own words echoed back. "One of the paramedics told me that's what you said when they asked why you risked your life for a stranger," Darren explained. "Those words stayed with me for 3 years." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was filled only by the twins, softly whispering in the bedroom. "After the accident," Darren finally continued, "I promised myself I would change, that I would do more for others. But the truth is, I went back to my life, back to my business, and forgot that promise." He looked around the small apartment. "Until today." Nadine studied his face for a long moment. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because this time," Darren replied with a conviction that surprised him, "I don't want to disappear and forget. I want to help. I want to make a difference, for you and for your daughters." The tears Nadine had been holding back finally slipped down her cheeks. "I have no way to pay you back. I'm not asking for payment," Darren smiled. "I'm asking for permission to help, to be present, to not vanish this time." Before Nadine could respond, Sadie and Tessa ran out of the bedroom. "Mama, are you crying?" Tessa asked, alarmed. "They're happy tears, sweetheart," Nadine reassured them, opening her arms. The girls nestled against her on the sofa. "Mr. Darren," Sadie looked at him with serious eyes, "are you really going to help Mom?" "I will," Darren promised, feeling something unknown expand in his chest. "And I promise I won't disappear this time." Nadine hugged her daughters tighter, looking at Darren over their heads. "Thank you," she said simply. Darren nodded, knowing his life had changed irrevocably that afternoon. The account he came to close at the bank could wait. There were more important accounts opening now, accounts of gratitude, presence, and second chances. And for the first time in a long time, Darren Cole didn't feel alone. The hospital hallway was long and white, a tunnel of fluorescence that seemed to swallow every sound. Darren watched doctors and nurses hurry by with their clipboards and tired expressions, while he sat on the hard plastic chair, hands clasped as if in prayer. 3 days. 72 hours since he convinced Nadine to accept his help. 48 hours since he brought her to the city's best hospital. 24 hours of intensive tests. When the consultation room door finally opened, Darren stood so quickly that he felt a momentary dizziness. Dr. Patel, unrelated to Nadine's neighbor, just a curious coincidence, gestured for him to enter. Nadine was sitting in a chair across the table, looking even more fragile under the harsh lights of the exam room. She wore a hospital gown over a nightdress, and her bare feet barely touched the floor. When Darren entered, she tried to smile, but the effort seemed to cost her precious energy. "Mr. Cole," the doctor began, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Rivers agreed that you could be present during our conversation." Darren nodded, sitting beside Nadine. On an impulse he couldn't explain, he reached out and lightly touched her hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward, accepting that small comfort. "The test results are in Doctor," Patel continued, opening a folder with images and charts that Darren didn't fully understand. "As we suspected, Mrs. Rivers's liver failure is in an advanced stage." "How long?" Nadine asked directly, her voice low but steady. The doctor hesitated, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture Darren immediately recognized as a tactic to buy time before delivering bad news. "Without surgery, 3 months, maybe 4. Nadine closed her eyes for a moment, and her hand squeezed Darren's with surprising strength. "Then we operate as soon as possible," Darren declared, as if it were that simple. Dr. Patel put his glasses back on. "Unfortunately, Mr. Cole, it's not that simple. Mrs. Rivers is significantly weakened. Her body wouldn't tolerate surgery in its current state." "What does that mean?" Darren asked, feeling a knot form in his throat. "It means we need supportive treatment first," the doctor explained. "Intensive nutrition, medications to stabilize liver function, transfusions, maybe even temporary dialysis. We must strengthen her before considering surgery." "How long will that take?" Nadine asked, her practical tone contrasting with her pale face. "At least 4 to 6 weeks. "Let's start today," Darren stated, not as a question, but as an order. Dr. Patel nodded. "I've already reserved a private room. The team is preparing everything to begin treatment today." When the doctor stepped out to arrange the necessary paperwork, a heavy silence fell over the exam room. Darren still held Nadine's hand, not sure what to say. "My daughters," she finally broke the silence. "I'll take care of them," Darren replied immediately. Nadine looked at him with an expression mixing gratitude and doubt. "You barely know us." "I know enough," he repeated the same words he had said days before. "They'll be fine, I promise." "They've never been away from me for more than one night," Nadine confessed, her voice trembling. "Not after their fathers, after he left." Darren nodded, not pressing for more details. "We can bring them to visit every day, and you can call whenever you want." "They don't have a phone," Nadine smiled weakly. "We sold the last cell phone to pay the electricity bill." "That won't be a problem anymore," Darren assured her. Then, suddenly aware of how that sounded, he added, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound arrogant." To his surprise, Nadine laughed softly, the first genuinely happy sound he'd heard from her. "I think you've earned the right to sound a bit arrogant, considering what you're doing for us." Dr. Patel returned with a stack of documents and a nurse pushing a wheelchair. The reality of the situation hit Nadine, and Darren saw fear finally break through her composure. "The girls can't see me like this," she murmured as the nurse helped her into the wheelchair. "I don't want to scare them." "I'll prepare everything before bringing them," Darren promised. "I'll explain it as best I can." Nadine grabbed his arm as he leaned in to say goodbye. "They like bedtime stories, and Sadie is afraid of the dark. She needs a little light on. Tessa pretends she isn't, but she is. And they're allergic to strawberries, and—" "We'll take it one step at a time," Darren interrupted gently. "I'll handle everything. Right now, you need to focus on getting stronger." Nadine hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Darren." "For everything." Only when the nurse began pushing the wheelchair down the hallway did Nadine turn one more time. "My address. You need the keys." "I already took care of that with Mrs. Bennett," Darren reassured her. "She helped me gather the girls' things." As he watched Nadine disappear into the elevator, Darren felt the weight of the responsibility he had just undertaken. 3 days ago, his biggest concern was closing his mother's bank account. Now he was about to become the temporary guardian of 2 6-year-old children. "Is this a house or a castle?" Tessa asked, eyes wide as the Aston Martin drove through Darren's mansion gates. "I think it's just a big house," Sadie replied, though she too looked impressed. In the driver's seat, Darren couldn't hide a smile. The twins had been surprisingly calm when he told them their mother would stay in the hospital for a few weeks. He suspected Mrs. Bennett had already prepared them before he arrived. "It's just a house," he confirmed, parking in the circular drive. "A big, empty house. It'll be nice to have company for a while." "You live here alone?" Sadie asked, unfastening her seatbelt. "Yes," Darren answered, helping them out of the car. "Well, there's a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week and a gardener on Mondays, but usually it's just me." "You don't have family?" Tessa asked with the frankness only a child can have. Darren hesitated. "No more. My mother passed away 6 months ago." "Like Grandma?" Sadie nodded with wisdom beyond her years. "We're sorry." "Thank you," Darren replied, surprised at how easily the girls talked about loss. "Shall we go in?" "You can pick which rooms you want." The 3-story mansion was a blend of modern and classic architecture, lots of open spaces, large windows, elegant furniture that looked barely touched. The twins explored every room with exclamations of surprise, while Darren carried their small suitcases. "Where's the TV?" Tessa asked after touring the main living room. "I don't have a TV in the living room," Darren explained. "There's one in the home theater in the basement." "You have a theater?" Sadie asked in disbelief. "It's just a room with a big screen and some armchairs," he minimized, suddenly aware of the contrast between his lifestyle and theirs. After showing them around the house, Darren led them upstairs to the 2nd floor, where 2 adjacent guest rooms had been hastily prepared. "Do you want separate rooms or to stay together?" he asked. The twins exchanged a look. "Together," they answered in unison. "Makes sense," Darren agreed. "Let's use this bigger room then." The room had a large king-size bed that looked giant to the twins. There was also a desk, an armchair, and a private bathroom that especially impressed them. "How many jets does the shower have?" "It's getting late," Darren noticed, checking his watch. "You must be hungry." "A little," Sadie admitted. "Well, I could—" Darren stopped. suddenly realizing he didn't know what children ate for dinner. Worse, he didn't know how to cook. "We could order something." "Like pizza?" Tessa asked hopefully. "Sure, pizza is an excellent idea," Darren agreed, relieved. Pizza it is. After dinner, improvised on the usually unused kitchen island, came the challenge of bath time and bedtime. To his astonishment, Darren discovered that supervising two 6-year-old girls' bath was a logistical operation involving finding the perfect water temperature, ensuring soap didn't get in their eyes, and making sure their hair was properly washed. "You're doing it wrong," Tessa informed him when he clumsily tried to comb her wet hair. "Mama does it like this," Sadie demonstrated with her own brush, using gentler strokes. "I'm learning," Darren admitted, trying to mimic her movement. Then came pajamas, which were in the wrong suitcase, brushing teeth, too much toothpaste, according to the experts, and finally the bedtime story. Darren sat on the edge of the enormous bed, where the twins looked tiny under the white duvet, and opened the book Mrs. Bennet had packed in their luggage. "The Princess and the Frog," he read the title, adjusting the small lamp he had installed hastily after remembering Tessa's fear of the dark. "Do you know how to do voices?" Tessa asked, settling against the pillows. "Voices?" "Yes, like Mama does," Sadie explained. "Different voices for each character." Oh, Darren understood, feeling more and more out of his comfort zone. "I can try." What followed was probably the most dramatic and least skilled reading of The Princess and the Frog ever done, with Darren alternating between a shrill voice for the princess and an exaggerated deep croak for the frog that made the girls burst into laughter. "That doesn't sound like a frog," Tessa exclaimed between laughs. "More like a bear with a cold," Sadie added, rolling with laughter. Darren feigned indignation. "You question my authentic royal frog voice? I am deeply offended." That only prompted more laughter, and Darren found himself laughing along, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. When he finally finished the story, the girls were sleepy but satisfied. "You're not as good as Mama," Tessa murmured, already closing her eyes, "but it wasn't that bad." "High praise coming from you," Darren smiled, tucking the blanket in. "When do we see Mama?" Sadie asked, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Tomorrow," Darren promised. "Right after breakfast." "Do you know how to make breakfast?" Tessa asked, clearly skeptical. "Absolutely not," Darren admitted, "but I know the number of an excellent place that delivers." That seemed to satisfy them, and soon both were asleep. Darren sat there for a moment, watching their rhythmic breathing, the striking similarity between them even in sleep. As he left the room, leaving the door ajar and the nightlight on, he realized that his house, always so silent, always so empty, now had sounds. Soft breaths, the occasional rustling beneath the covers, the undeniable presence of life. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall for a moment. What was he doing? He didn't know anything about children. He didn't know how to be responsible for two small, vulnerable lives. He didn't know how to balance hospital visits, work, and daily care. He didn't know how to comb hair, do character voices, or prepare a proper breakfast. But as he descended the stairs to his office, planning to rearrange his meetings for the coming days, Darren realized that, for the first time in a long while, he felt something beyond the emptiness that had followed him since his mother's death. That tiny apartment on the east side of town held more life, more love, more purpose than his mansion had ever known. And maybe, just maybe, by trying to save Nadine Rivers and her daughters, he was unknowingly saving himself. Saturday morning dawned with an impossibly blue sky, the kind that seems hand-painted. Darren woke early as always, but this time he didn't head to check emails or plan meetings. Walking down the hallway he paused outside the ajar bedroom door of the twins. Tessa and Sadie slept in the same position, on their sides facing each other like mirrors, messy hair scattered on their pillows. They'd been with him for a week now, and the routine was starting to take shape. Breakfast, which he still didn't know how to make, hospital visit, lunch at the cafe next door, return home, attempt to help with homework, when there was any, dinner, usually takeout, bath, less chaotic each time, story, his voice is improving, and finally, the quiet of night. But something wasn't right. Despite the routine, Darren noticed the growing tension in the girls. Their smiles were less frequent. The questions about their mother multiplied. The night before, he found Sadie silently crying in the bathroom, and when he asked what was wrong, she just shook her head and said nothing, eyes fixed on the floor. Tessa had nightmares. Twice that week, Darren woke to muffled screams from their room. He'd rushed to find her sitting on the bed, face wet with tears, while Sadie tried to comfort her. She dreamed that Mama wouldn't come back, Sadie explained, in the frighteningly matter-of-fact tone of a child who already knew the weight of loss. The hospital visits weren't helping. Nadine was weaker before she began to get stronger, a side effect of the intensive treatment. The girls noticed every change in their mother's face, every new tube, every new monitor. They forced brave smiles during visits. But Darren watched their shoulders slump again as soon as they left the room. They needed a different day. A day with no hospital, no fear, no constant reminders of life's fragility. As he watched them sleep, an idea formed in his mind. By 9 in the morning, Darren had made 3 important calls. One to Nadine's nurse explaining he'd postponed today's visit until late afternoon. Another to his assistant asking to cancel his video conference with Tokyo investors. And the third to Mrs. Bennett with a specific question that made her laugh on the other end of the line. "I never imagined hearing Darren Cole ask this," she commented. When the twins finally came down for breakfast, sleepy and still in pajamas, they found Darren in the kitchen with a conspiratorial expression that only children could detect immediately. "Good morning," he greeted with exaggerated enthusiasm that instantly aroused the girls' suspicion. "What's going on?" Tessa asked, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on is that today is Saturday," Darren replied, as if that explained everything. "Yesterday was also Saturday," Sadie pointed out pragmatically, climbing onto a high stool to reach the kitchen island. "Yes, but today is a special Saturday," Darren continued, placing bowls of cereal in front of them, his only reliable cooking skill. "Today, we're not going to the hospital in the morning." The twins immediately perked up. "Is Mama okay?" Sadie asked, worry in her voice. "Your mother is all right," Darren assured quickly. "In fact, she agreed with my plan. We'll visit her late this afternoon because this morning," he paused dramatically, "we have a special mission." "What mission?" Tessa asked, curiosity overcoming suspicion. "Mission Perfect Day," Darren announced with feigned seriousness. "We need comfortable clothes and shoes for walking, and a spirit of adventure." The girls exchanged bewildered looks. "Where are we going on this mission?" Sadie asked, always the more cautious of the two. "Secret," Darren winked, "but I promise you'll like it." An hour later, the Aston Martin was leaving the city along the state highway, with Tessa and Sadie in the back seat, heads turning side to side trying to guess the destination. Darren had put a mysterious box in the trunk, refusing to reveal its contents. "Is it far?" Tessa asked for the 5th time in 15 minutes. "Just 10 more minutes," Darren answered, checking the GPS. When he finally turned onto a secondary road, the girls leaned forward, trying to see beyond the row of trees lining the way. The road ended in a small gravel parking lot, almost empty at that early hour. "We're here," Darren announced, parking the car. "Where are we?" Sadie asked, looking around as Darren helped them out. "Eagle Point State Park," he replied, opening the trunk to retrieve the mysterious box. "I used to come here when I was a child." The twins watched with growing interest as Darren took out from the box a worn plaid blanket Mrs. Bennett had lent him, a small cooler with juice and sandwiches, and a red frisbee. "Are we having a picnic?" Tessa asked, her eyes lighting up. "Exactly," Darren confirmed. "And maybe some other fun things if you're up for it." The park was a green oasis less than 30 minutes from the city, gentle grassy hills, century-old trees offering plenty of shade, a small lake with ducks, and well-kept paths winding through the landscape. Darren led the girls to a higher spot overlooking the lake, where he spread the blanket under the shade of a majestic oak. "What do you think?" he asked, noticing the twins' curious expressions as they surveyed the spot. "It's pretty," Sadie replied cautiously. "But what do we do here?" The question caught Darren off guard. "What do you mean?" "Is there a special activity?" Tessa elaborated. Like at school field trips. Darren smiled, suddenly understanding. No, actually the plan is not to have a plan. We can run around, lie on the grass and look at the clouds, feed the ducks, play frisbee, or just sit and talk. The girls looked confused by the concept. We've never done that, Sadie admitted at last. A trip with no purpose. There was something in that simple confession that squeezed Darren's heart. He sat down on the blanket and motioned for them to join him. My mother used to say that the sky heals, he commented, looking at the perfect blue above them. When I was sad or worried, she would bring me to a place like this. She said being under the open sky put our problems in perspective. Your mother sounded nice, Tessa said, lying on her back to watch the sky. She was, Darren agreed, feeling the familiar pang of longing but without the usual bitterness. What was her name? Sadie asked, mimicking her sister's position. Elizabeth, Darren answered, but everyone called her Lizzie. Do you miss her? Tessa asked with children's blunt honesty. Every day, Darren admitted, but some days are easier than others. There was a comfortable silence, broken only by birdsong and the rustling leaves in the gentle breeze. Darren watched the girls gradually relax, their small bodies releasing the tension they had carried for days. That cloud looks like a rabbit, Tessa suddenly pointed out. Where? Sadie asked, squinting. There. See? The ears are long. Soon, all three were engrossed in the oldest game in the world, finding figures in the clouds. An elephant. A boat. A giraffe. No, Darren, that's clearly a dinosaur, Tessa corrected indignantly. Time seemed different there, slower, kinder. After the clouds came sandwiches, simple but surprisingly tasty outdoors, clumsy attempts to throw the frisbee, with Darren discovering his knack for closing business deals didn't extend to accurate throws, and a careful exploration of the small pond, where a family of ducks eagerly accepted the crumbs they offered. It was during the second improvised picnic, this time with apples and cookies bought at the park shop, that the conversation took an unexpected turn. Darren, Sadie began, her casual tone contrasting with what she was about to say. We stopped going to school. We had a scholarship because Mama cleaned the school. Tessa cast a quick look at her sister, as if breaking some unspoken code between them. When was that? Darren asked gently, keeping his tone calm despite his surprise. 2 months ago, Sadie continued, picking at blades of grass beside the blanket. When Mama got too tired to work, we lost the scholarship. She said we could come back next semester, but she got sicker, Tessa finished as her sister's voice faltered. Darren listened quietly, trying to process this new information. The girls had stopped studying 2 months ago, exactly when Nadine's symptoms worsened, and no one had told him. Neither Mrs. Bennett nor the girls themselves during all those clumsy homework help attempts, which he now realized were just old exercises they invented to avoid disappointing him. We didn't want to tell you, Sadie explained, still not looking directly at him. Mama always said education is the most important thing. She cried when the principal called, Tessa added in a low voice. It was the only time we saw her cry because of her illness. In that moment, sitting on the grass with 2 6-year-old children, Darren saw up close, for the first time, how dignity can disappear quietly, how a family can unravel in silence, piece by piece, without dramatic tragedies, just the slow, steady erosion of the small dignities that make up a life. Not only had Nadine's health been taken, but her job, her ability to provide for her daughters, her pride in ensuring their education, and she had faced it all alone, hiding her tears, maintaining her composure in front of them. Did you like school? Darren finally asked. Yes, Tessa answered immediately. I like science. We made a volcano that actually erupted. I like reading, Sadie added. The library had so many books. Darren nodded, making mental notes, something to address on Monday. Another piece of the puzzle that was now his responsibility. I think we need to keep playing frisbee, he announced abruptly, standing up. I'm sure I can throw it without hitting that tree this time. The girls smiled, relieved by the change of topic. Soon they were running across the grass, laughing as Darren, predictably, sent the frisbee straight into a low-hanging maple branch. The afternoon wore on, the sun gradually dipping toward the horizon. They sat by the lake's edge, skipping stones and counting how many skips they could make. "Thank you for today," Sadie said suddenly, her small voice firm. "Yeah," Tessa agreed. "It was nice not thinking about sad things for a while." Darren felt a lump in his throat. "You're welcome," he managed to say. "We can do this more often if you want." "Even when Mama comes home?" Tessa asked hopefully. "Especially when your mother comes home," Darren confirmed. "She's going to love this place." The girls smiled, and in their identical smile, Darren saw something that hadn't been there before, a small spark of hope. On the way back, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tessa fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting on her sister's shoulder. Sadie fought sleep, determined to stay awake. "Darren," she called softly. "Yes." "Is Mama really going to be okay?" The question, so direct, so full of vulnerability, made Darren grip the steering wheel tighter. He could lie, say he was absolutely certain, offer guarantees he didn't have. It would be easier. "We're doing everything we can," he finally replied. "Your mother is very strong, and the doctors are very good." Sadie was silent for a moment, digesting the answer. "Okay," she said at last. "I guess that's the best we can do, right? Try as much as possible." "Exactly," Darren agreed, surprised by the wisdom in such simple words. When they arrived at the mansion, both were sleeping soundly. Darren carried them, one at a time, to their room without waking them. He swapped their sneakers for slippers, tucked them in under the duvet and left the nightlight on. In the hallway, he paused to look once more at the small sleeping figures. The lightness of that day had created a bond that didn't need grand promises or declarations, only presence. His presence that day in the park, under that sky, witnessing their simple joys and deep sorrows. On Monday, he would handle the school situation. On Tuesday, he would see if Nadine's treatment could be accelerated. On Wednesday, he would rearrange his will to ensure that, no matter what happened, these girls would never have to choose between dignity and survival again. But that was for later. Today, he had given them a day without sadness, and, without realizing it, they had given him the same. Monday dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky had drained all its blue during the previous day's picnic. Darren woke before his alarm, still echoing with images from his dreams, strange dreams where his mother and Nadine talked in a garden he didn't recognize, while the twins played in the background. The girls were still sleeping when he went down to his office. There was a growing list of things to solve, and the school issue was at the top. Calls needed to be made, meetings scheduled, and all before the afternoon hospital visit. His office in the mansion was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather, with a prime view of the gardens. It was where he retreated when he needed to think or work without interruptions. In the past 2 weeks since the twins arrived, he had scarcely been able to use it. As he turned on his laptop, his eyes landed on the lower right drawer of his desk, the one he had kept locked for months. His mother's drawer. Elizabeth Cole had been his partner in business before she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. During her last 6 months, she kept her personal documents in that drawer, and after her death, Darren simply hadn't found the courage to clear it out. Without much thought, he took the small key from his wallet and unlocked the drawer. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered, clinging to the papers and meticulously organized folders. There was something comforting in that aroma, lavender and vanilla, the perfume she had worn for decades. The drawer contained folders with documents he already knew, her will, insurance policies, property deeds. But there was also a small box he didn't recall seeing before, dark wood polished by time, with the initials EC engraved on the lid. Darren took it out carefully and placed it on the desk. Inside, he found some items his mother clearly considered precious. The first Mother's Day card he made for her at age 5, the pen they used to sign the contract for his first big acquisition, an old photo of the 3 of them, his father, his mother, and him before the separation, and at the bottom, an envelope with his name written in his mother's elegant handwriting. Darren felt his heart quicken. He knew well his mother's tradition of writing letters at important moments, a practice she kept even in the digital age. He had received letters from her on his first day of school, at graduation when they opened the office together. But this was new. With slightly trembling fingers, he opened the envelope and took out some letters on light blue stationery he immediately recognized as hers. "My dear Darren," the letter began, dated just 3 weeks before her death. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. I hope you haven't found this letter too soon. You have always been impatient with surprises. Remember how you'd scour the house looking for Christmas presents when you were a child? I've been thinking a lot about what to leave you, besides the material assets we built together. What final advice can a mother give to a son who is already a successful man in his own right? What wisdom can I share that you haven't already gained in your journey? Perhaps only this: money isn't everything. I know it sounds hypocritical coming from me, who spent decades building our fortune. But as time slips away, I see clearly what truly matters. Do you remember when you were 12 and your father left us? You found me crying on the porch and said, with all the determination of that age, 'One day I'm going to be so rich that no one will ever be able to hurt us again.' That broke my heart, Darren. Not because it was naive, but because I feared you would spend your life building walls instead of bridges. You are brilliant in business, always have been. But sometimes I wonder if, in the pursuit of success, you've forgotten how to live, how to connect, how to let people cross those walls you built so carefully. One day, son, you will see. And when you see, you will do good. True good. Not just donations to distant causes, though that is important, but the kind of kindness that requires you to get involved, to risk your heart, to be present. My greatest regret is not dying. It's not being here to see the remarkable man you will become when you finally open those doors you have kept closed for so long. Remember always, the true legacy is not what we leave in banks but the lives we touch. With all my love, today and always, Mommy." Darren closed his eyes, feeling the weight of those words and, at the same time, a strange relief, as if his mother, even after leaving, could still read his soul and give him exactly the words he needed at that precise moment. "One day you will see, and when you seek you will do good, true good." Those words echoed in his mind as he thought of the last weeks, of the twins sleeping upstairs, of their mother fighting in the hospital, of the small moments of joy and sorrow he had witnessed. Something shifted inside him at that moment. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or a sudden transformation, but a gentle realignment, like a stone that, after being still for years, finally finds its correct place. When he heard the twins' light footsteps upstairs, Darren carefully put the letter back in the box. There were decisions to make and actions to take, and for the first time in a long time, he felt absolute clarity about the path ahead. Westview Preparatory School sat on a tree-lined campus on the outskirts of the city, red brick buildings, immaculate lawns, and a reputation for excellence that justified the astronomical tuition. It was the kind of place that produced future leaders, scientists and artists, the kind of place Elizabeth Cole had chosen for her son decades ago. Darren parked in front of the administration building at 9:30 a.m. after leaving the twins with Mrs. Bennett for a morning of art projects, a code to give him time to resolve their schooling situation without raising premature expectations. "Mr. Cole," Principal Margaret Walsh greeted him with a warm smile. "What a pleasant surprise. I didn't know you were interested in our scholarship program." Darren shook the hand of the middle-aged woman who had overseen the school for 2 decades, long enough to be principal when he himself had attended. "Actually, Principal Walsh, I'm here about a specific matter," Darren explained as he took a seat. "It's about the Rivers twins," he continued. "Sadie and Tessa. They attended Eastside Elementary until 2 months ago, when they lost their scholarship because their mother, who worked in cleaning, fell seriously ill." The principal's expression shifted subtly, a mix of surprise and curiosity. "I see. And what is your relationship to these children, Mr. Cole?" "I'm caring for them temporarily while their mother is hospitalized," Darren replied, aware of how improbable it sounded. "It's a long story, but Mrs. Rivers saved my life some years ago. Now I'm repaying that debt." The principal nodded slowly, processing the information. "That is very noble of you. And how can I help in this situation?" "I want to ensure they get the best possible education," Darren stated, Not just now, while they're under my care, but for the future, regardless of what happens with their mother. For almost an hour, Darren and Principal Walsh discussed possibilities. Westview had a scholarship program, but it was extremely competitive and usually aimed at older students. Mid-year transfers were discouraged, and there was the matter of their adjustment. The twins came from a completely different school environment. "Don't get me wrong, Mr. Cole," the principal said after outlining the difficulties. "We would love to have the girls here. But I want to make sure this is the best solution for them, not just to ease your conscience." The woman's frankness surprised Darren, but he appreciated it. "I understand your concern," he replied. "That's why I propose something broader." Darren explained his idea, an educational fund not only for Sadie and Tessa, but for other children in similar situations. A partnership between his family foundation and the school, ensuring talented students never had to abandon their studies due to adverse family circumstances. "I'm willing to make a substantial initial donation to establish this fund," he concluded, "on the condition that Sadie and Tessa can start as soon as next semester, as soon as the paperwork is ready." The principal's eyes lit up as she made quick notes. "Mr. Cole, this goes far beyond what I expected when I scheduled this meeting. It's an extraordinary proposal." "Sometimes we need a reminder of what truly matters," Darren replied, thinking of his mother's letter. "I believe education is one of those fundamental pillars." When he left the school nearly 2 hours later, Darren carried a folder with enrollment forms and information about the educational program. Principal Walsh had agreed to visit the twins the next day for an informal assessment, and if all went well, they could begin the following Monday. In the car, Darren allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. It wasn't just the relief of solving a practical problem, but something deeper, a sense of doing exactly what he should, of being aligned with a purpose greater than merely accumulating more wealth or power. "True good," his mother's words echoed again. "We have a surprise for you," Darren announced at dinner that night. The twins, who were eagerly munching on lasagna that Mrs. Bennett had kindly prepared, "These children can't live on takeout food alone, Mr. Cole," looked at him curiously. "What surprise?" Tessa asked immediately. Darren glanced at Nadine, seated at the head of the table in a wheelchair. This was her first night home from the hospital, a special 24-hour leave that the doctors had granted, recognizing the progress of her treatment and the emotional benefit of spending some time at home with her daughters. Nadine looked tired, but her eyes were brighter, her skin less yellow, the first signs that the intensive treatment was working. She nodded slightly, giving Darren permission to continue. "Soon you'll be able to go back to school," he announced. "I talked to a school today, and they're very excited to have you next week." The twins' reactions were instant and contrasting. Sadie's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Really? We can go back to our school?" Tessa, on the other hand, frowned. "But how?" "Mama still can't work there." Darren exchanged another glance with Nadine, who decided to intervene. "Actually, girls," she explained gently, "you're going to a new school, a very good school that Darren knows." "Westview," Darren added. "It's a bit farther more, but it has an amazing science program for you, Tessa, and a huge library for you, Sadie." The twins processed the information slowly. "Is it a school for rich kids?" Sadie asked at last, with the perceptiveness that often surprised Darren. "It's a school for children who want to learn," he corrected gently. "Some come from wealthy families, others don't. What's important is that everyone is welcome." "But," Tessa hesitated, "how will we pay?" Nadine reached out and touched her daughter's arm. "Darren created something called an educational fund. It's like special money just for schools." "Not just for you," Darren added, "but for other children too. Kids who, like you, need a little help to keep studying when things get tough at home." For a moment, the twins just stared at him, processing what it meant. Then, almost simultaneously as only twins can, they jumped from their chairs and ran to hug him. "Thank you, Darren," Tessa exclaimed, her arms wrapped around his neck. "I'm going to study so hard," Sadie solemnly promised as she joined the hug. From her seat at the head of the table, Nadine watched the scene with teary eyes. When Darren caught her gaze over the twins' heads, he saw something in it that hadn't been there before, a complete confidence, a silent understanding. And in that moment, Darren knew his mother was right. He finally saw. And what he saw in front of him was not an obligation or a burden, but a gift, the chance to do good, true good. Autumn had arrived, painting the trees red and gold. It had been 6 weeks since Nadine started treatment, and the small victories had created the illusion of steady progress. Better days, more energy, short trips out of the hospital. The twins had adapted surprisingly well to Westview. Tessa was already a star in the science club, while Sadie devoured books at a pace that impressed even the most seasoned teachers. The routine that seemed impossible at first now flowed naturally. Darren balanced work and responsibilities with the girls, managing video calls between meetings, and finally learning to prepare at least 3 simple meals. The mansion, once so sterile and silent, now housed drawings stuck on the refrigerator, small shoes in the hallway, and animated movie soundtracks playing from speakers that once only broadcast financial news. That Wednesday began like any other, quick breakfast. Darren dropping the girls off at school. "Remember, Ava will pick you up today." Then straight to the hospital for the monthly checkup with the medical team before heading to the office. Dr. Patel awaited him in the hepatology department's conference room, accompanied by 2 other specialists Darren already knew from previous visits. But there was something different that morning, a nearly tangible tension in the air, the kind of heaviness that precedes storms. "Mr. Cole," the doctor greeted him without his usual smile. "Thank you for coming." Darren nodded, sitting at the conference table. "How is she today?" Dr. Patel exchanged a quick look with his colleagues before answering, "Unfortunately, I don't have good news." The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating. Darren felt his palms suddenly sweat. "The latest tests showed significant deterioration of liver function," the doctor continued, opening a folder with charts and test results. "Despite aggressive treatment, the disease has progressed faster than we expected." "But she seemed better last week," Darren countered, his voice betraying his disbelief. "She managed to spend all day out of the hospital on Sunday." "That's one of the cruelties of this disease," explained Dr. Sharma, the team's hepatologist. "There can be periods of seeming improvement even when the overall condition worsens." "What does that mean exactly?" Darren asked, though something inside him already knew the answer. "Doctor." Patel removed his glasses, a gesture Darren had learned to associate with bad news. "It means the surgery we had planned won't be enough. The damage to her liver is too extensive for a partial resection." "So what do we do?" Darren asked, leaning forward. "Is there another procedure? Another specialist we can consult?" The 3 doctors exchanged looks again before Dr. Patel answered, "Only a liver transplant can save her now." The word transplant fell like a sentence. Darren knew enough about medicine to understand what that meant. Waiting lists, compatibility, scarce time. "How long do we have?" "Without a transplant? 3 weeks, maybe a month." The 3rd doctor, Dr. Chen, a transplant specialist, leaned forward. "We've already placed Mrs. Rivers on the transplant waiting list with top priority due to the severity of her case. But I must be honest, the average waiting time, even for priority cases, is several weeks to months." "Weeks she doesn't have," Darren concluded. "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "That's why we're discussing a living donor." "How does that work?" Darren asked immediately. "The liver is the only internal organ that can regenerate," Dr. Chen explained. "A compatible donor can give a portion of their liver, which will grow in the recipient, while the donor's remaining liver also regenerates." "What are the risks to the donor?" "It's a major surgery," the doctor didn't hide. "There are significant risks: infection, bleeding, anesthetic complications. The donor mortality rate is low, under 0.5%, but it exists." Darren absorbed the information in silence. Then, without hesitation, "I want to volunteer as the donor." The doctors did not seem surprised. They had likely anticipated such a reaction. "Mr. Cole, we appreciate your willingness," Dr. Patel stepped in, "but there are several factors to consider. Blood compatibility, organ size, and your own health. Also, we need to evaluate if there is any biological family member who could be tested first." "She has no family," Darren replied. "Only the girls, who are too young, and a few close friends." Still, we must follow protocol, Dr. Chen explained. We'll test your blood type first to check basic compatibility. Then, if it matches, we'll run more specific tissue tests. When do we start? Darren asked. Right away. If you're available, Dr. Sharma replied. We've already prepared the consent forms. As he signed the documents, one question lingered in Darren's mind. How would he explain this to the twins? How would he make sure they didn't feel abandoned again? 2 hours later, Darren was in Nadine's hospital room. She was asleep, her pale face against the white pillow, tubes and monitors telling the silent story of her body in decline. He sat in the chair next to her bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, the fragility evident in every breath. When she finally opened her eyes, she didn't seem surprised to find him there. They told you, she said. Not a question, but a statement. Darren nodded. Why didn't you tell me you were getting worse? A weak smile touched Nadine's lips. What good would that do? You're already doing so much. I'm going to be your donor, he announced without preamble. Nadine blinked several times, processing the information. Darren, no, it's too dangerous. I'm blood type O, universal donor. That doesn't mean you'll be compatible in every aspect. It greatly increases the chances, he insisted. The other tests will confirm soon enough. Nadine tried to sit up, a visible effort that made Darren help adjust her pillows. You can't do this. The girls, they're fine, they're safe, and they want their mother to live. Nadine shook her head, silent tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. I can't let you risk your life for me. You risked yours for me once, Darren gently reminded her. In fact, you didn't even know me. At least I have the privilege of knowing exactly why I'm doing this. A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the constant beep of the monitors. What if something happens to you? Nadine finally asked, voicing the fear that surely haunted the twins. Nothing will happen, Darren assured her with more confidence than he actually felt. But if it does, I've arranged everything. Ava, my assistant whom you met, has clear instructions. The girls will never be alone. They will never be helpless. Why? Nadine asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you doing all this? Darren thought of his mother's letter, of the day at the park, of the twins' laughter echoing through the empty halls of his home, of the small victories and big revelations of the past weeks. Because finally, he answered simply, I understood what my mother tried to teach me my entire life, that life only makes sense when lived beyond ourselves. Now, 3 days later, the final results confirmed what Darren already suspected. He was a viable donor candidate. Compatibility wasn't perfect, but good enough to proceed. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. That night, he gathered the twins in the living room of the mansion. Ava, his longtime assistant, was present at his request. In the past 2 months, she had become a constant presence in the girls' lives, sometimes picking them up from school, bringing thoughtful little gifts, helping with school projects when Darren was busy with Nadine. I have something important to tell you, Darren began, sitting on the couch between the two. The twins looked at him attentively. At 6 years old, they already had a keen sensitivity to serious conversations. Your mother needs a very special surgery, he explained, choosing his words carefully. Her liver. You remember that it's the organ that's sick, right? Both nodded. Darren had bought children's anatomy books to help them understand their mother's illness. It's badly damaged now, and the doctors need to replace it with a new one. Like a broken part? Tessa asked, always practical. Kind of like that, Darren confirmed. But we can't just buy a new liver at a store. We need a special person to donate part of theirs. Who will give it? Sadie asked. Darren took a deep breath. I will. The reactions were immediate and intense. Tessa's eyes widened in shock, while Sadie's face contorted in an expression of pure fear. But, will you be okay? Tessa managed to ask. Yes, Darren assured her. The liver is an amazing organ that can regenerate. I'll give part of mine to your mother, and then we'll both have full healthy livers. Is it dangerous? Sadie asked, her voice trembling. Darren hesitated. He had promised himself never to lie to them. All surgeries have some risk, he admitted. But the doctors are the best. and the chances of everything going well are very, very high. Sadie began to cry quietly at first, then in sobs that shook her small body. Tessa followed a few seconds later. Darren held them, feeling their tears soak his shirt. "What if you don't come back?" Sadie finally voiced between sobs, the primal fear haunting them both. Darren swallowed the lump in his own throat. "I will come back," he promised. "But if I don't, Ava will take care of you." He indicated his assistant, who watched the scene with teary eyes. "And you will never be alone." Ava moved closer, kneeling before the girls. "You two are very important to Darren," she said softly, "which means you're very important to me too. I promise I will always be here, no matter what happens." The twins looked at her, still tearful but seeming to absorb the promise. Ava wasn't a stranger. She was the person who brought smiles on difficult days, who knew their preferences, who spoke to them like real people, not kids who needed shielding from everything. "Tomorrow morning, we're all going to the hospital," Darren continued. "You'll stay with Ava while Mom and I are in surgery, and when we wake up, we'll be the first to let you know." That night, when he finally got them to sleep, the twins refused to sleep apart from him. He brought mattresses to the floor of his own room, creating a makeshift camp. They fell asleep holding his hands, one on each side, as if they could keep him from disappearing during the night. Looking at their sleeping faces, Darren felt a mix of fear and determination he had never experienced before. It wasn't just Nadine's life at stake. It was the stability of these two children who, in such a short time, had become the center of his universe. The hospital was quiet in the early morning hours as they arrived. The twins, still sleepy, held Ava's hands as they walked through the familiar corridors to the surgical wing. Nadine was already being prepped when Darren was allowed a brief visit. "You don't have to do this," were her first words when he entered the room. "I know," he replied simply. "That's why I'm doing it." Silent tears rolled down her face. "The girls, they're with Ava. They're stronger than they look." "They're exactly as strong as they look," Nadine corrected with a small smile. "That's why I'm so afraid of failing them." "You won't," Darren assured her. "Nor will I." A nurse entered, indicating it was time to take Nadine to the operating room. "See you on the other side," Darren said, gently squeezing her hand. "That's a promise," she replied. The surgery began at 7:30 a.m., two teams working simultaneously, one removing part of Darren's liver, the other preparing Nadine to receive it. A carefully choreographed medical ballet that lasted many hours. In the waiting room, Ava kept the twins occupied with games, books, and occasional walks to the cafeteria for hot chocolate. As the hours passed, though, it became increasingly difficult to distract them. "It's taking a long time," Tessa commented, looking at the wall clock for the 100th time. "Big surgeries take time," Ava explained patiently. "Here it's a good sign it's taking a while. It means the doctors are being very careful." "What if they can't fix Mama?" Sadie asked, her voice small. "They will," Ava assured. "Your mother and Darren are with the best doctors in the country." It was nearly late afternoon when Dr. Patel finally appeared at the waiting room door. The twins immediately stood up, like little soldiers on alert. Ava rose as well, placing a protective hand on each of their shoulders. The doctor looked tired, but there was a sparkle in his eyes that made Ava's heart skip a beat. "Rivers Cole family," he called, though they were the only ones in the room. The girls ran to him before Ava could stop them. "Are they okay?" Tessa asked directly, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel crouched down to their level, a gesture that Ava immediately appreciated. "They both did well," he announced with a genuine smile. "It was a success." Sadie let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Tessa simply threw her arms around the surprised doctor's neck. "When can we see them?" Ava asked, stepping forward. "They're in recovery right now," Dr. Patel explained, gently disentangling himself from Tessa's hug. "Mrs. Rivers will probably wake up in a few hours. Mr. Cole, maybe a bit sooner. You can see them briefly as soon as they're awake." "Will they be in the same room?" Sadie asked. The doctor shook his head. "Initially, they'll be in separate ICU rooms for intensive monitoring, but if all goes well, in a few days they can be moved to regular rooms." When the doctor left, promising to return as soon as one of them woke up, The twins finally collapsed, not into tears of fear, but into a relief so deep they seemed utterly exhausted. Eva guided them back to the couches, where they curled up together, as they always did in moments of intense emotion. "He gave a part of himself to Mama," Tessa said after a few minutes of silence, as though she had just fully realized what had happened. "Yes," Eva confirmed. "A part of him saved your mother. Like in fairy tales," Sadie murmured, her eyes heavy with fatigue, "when someone gives something very precious to save someone else." Eva smiled, pulling them closer. "Yes, exactly like in fairy tales." What neither of them said, what perhaps only Eva fully understood at that moment, was the perfect symmetry of that gesture. A part of him saved the woman who once saved him whole, and in the process, they both had been transformed in ways no surgery could measure or document, a metamorphosis that went beyond flesh and blood, beyond regenerated organs and repaired bodies, a change in the very structure of who they were and what they could become together. Time in the hospital moved strangely, both slow and fast, marked not by hours but by small victories. The first walk down the hall, the first solid meal, the first night's sleep without interruption. Darren was transferred to a regular room on the 5th day, his body surprising the doctors with how quickly it recovered. Nadine, however, needed more time in the ICU. Her body, already weakened by the disease, fought harder to accept the new organ. There were moments of concern, unexpected fever, fluctuating lab values, but finally, on the 10th day, she was also transferred to a regular room. On the 12th day after surgery, Darren was finally allowed to walk unassisted through the hospital. He seized the first opportunity to visit Nadine in her room, something they had both longed for. Until then, their interactions had been limited to video calls arranged by the nurses, with the twins running between rooms to serve as enthusiastic messengers. It was a sunny Wednesday when Darren left his room, still moving cautiously as one learns to respect new limits. The hospital corridor was quiet at that hour, between morning rounds and lunch. Turning the corner toward Nadine's room, he spotted Ava sitting in a chair outside, reading something on her tablet. "Are they in there?" Darren asked as he approached. Ava looked up and smiled. "They arrived 20 minutes ago. I told them you'd be coming soon." "How is she today?" "Better. The physical therapist came earlier and was impressed with her progress." Darren nodded, satisfied. "And the girls? Excited? Impatient? The usual?" Ava paused. "They don't know you're coming. I thought it would be a nice surprise." "Excellent idea." Darren took a deep breath, preparing himself. "Let's go." He knocked lightly on the half-open door and gently pushed it open. The scene inside the room would forever be etched in his memory. Nadine sitting on the bed, propped up by pillows, with a book open in her lap. Sadie and Tessa, one on each side, following along with expressions of total concentration. It was Tessa who saw him first. Her eyes widened comically, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "Darren!" she shouted, jumping off the bed with enough energy to nearly knock the book off her mother's lap. Sadie spun around in disbelief before leaping off as well. "You're here!" The two ran across the room in a wild dash, colliding into him with enough force to make him stumble slightly. Darren felt a twinge of pain in his abdomen but didn't mind. His arms instinctively opened, enveloping them in a tight hug as they clung to him like little castaways to a safe harbor. "Thank you for saving our mother," Sadie sobbed, her face pressed against his shirt. "You gave her your liver," Tessa added, tears streaming freely. "You fixed her." Darren felt a lump in his throat. Carefully ignoring the pain from moving, he lowered himself until he was eye level with them, looking directly into their identical, teary eyes. "It was her who saved my life first," he said softly. "Many years ago when I was about to make a terrible mistake." He looked over their heads at Nadine, who watched them with bright, emotional eyes. "I'm only repaying a debt long overdue." "What mistake?" Tessa asked, always curious, even among tears. Darren smiled. "A story for another day. The important thing is we're all here now. And we'll all leave this hospital together soon." The twins stepped back slightly, dabbing their tears with their sleeves, suddenly concerned about his well-being. "Are you in pain?" Sadie asked, noticing how he leaned more on one leg. "Just a little," Darren admitted. Nothing that won't pass soon. You should sit, Tessa declared with authority, pulling him by the hand to the chair next to Nadine's bed. Only when he sat did Darren finally find Nadine's gaze. The transformation was remarkable. Color had returned to her face, the yellow tint completely gone. Her eyes, once constantly clouded by exhaustion, now had a clarity he had never seen before. "Hello, donor," she said with a small smile. "Hello, recipient," he replied, returning the smile. "Seems part of me adapted well to you." "The doctors say your liver is exceptional," she commented. "Apparently, you've kept it in excellent shape." "Years of avoiding alcohol to keep clarity for business decisions," he joked. "Who knew it would end up being useful for something truly important?" A comfortable silence fell over the room. The twins settled on the edge of Nadine's bed while Darren, on impulse, reached out to take her hand. "Now it's my turn to be present," he said, his voice low but firm. "And I will always be." Nadine looked at their joined hands, then at her daughters, and finally back at Darren. Something silent and profound passed between them, a promise that went beyond words, beyond conventional commitments. "We believe in you," she replied simply. Das du Saint-Vaender 3 days later, an unusual procession left the hospital. Nadine in a wheelchair, as protocol dictated, though she could already walk short distances. Darren by her side, walking slowly but unaided. The twins danced around them like small planets in eccentric orbit, unable to contain their joy at finally having everyone together outside those white walls. Ava waited for them at the entrance with the car, smiling as she saw them emerge through the automatic doors into the autumn sunlight. "Going home?" she asked, opening the passenger door. Darren looked at Nadine, a silent question in his eyes. "Going home," Nadine confirmed. It wasn't necessary to specify which home. Everyone knew it wasn't the tiny apartment on the east side of town, nor would it be just the mansion that used to belong only to Darren. It was a new concept of home they had built over the past weeks, a space that existed primarily in the bond between them. As the car pulled away from the hospital's parking lot, the twins waved enthusiastically to the doctors and nurses who had come out to say goodbye. Dr. Patel, in particular, looked emotional, watching the car drive off with the satisfied expression of someone witnessing not just a medical success, but a human transformation. For the first time, they left together as a real family. Not a family defined by documents or traditional blood ties, but by something perhaps deeper: choice, sacrifice, and the promise of shared days. The following months brought a new routine. Nadine's recovery continued with ups and downs, days of surprising strength followed by days of deep exhaustion. Darren gradually returned to work, but with a perspective transformed on what constituted a priority. The twins returned to Westview, no longer as special charity cases, but as part of a new program they had inadvertently inspired. The Stone Clear Foundation, the name chosen to reference the clarity Darren found after reading his mother's letter, was officially launched 3 months after the surgery. The initial goal was simple: provide free exams and treatments for vulnerable people, focusing particularly on liver diseases, but it quickly expanded to include other services: a scholarship program for children whose parents faced serious illnesses, psychological counseling for families in crisis, and even an emergency fund to cover basic living expenses during prolonged medical treatments. The launch ceremony was small but meaningful. Nadine, still recovering but already able to stand for longer periods, cut the ribbon at the entrance of the foundation's first clinic. "I can't think of anyone more fitting to inaugurate something that exists because of you," Darren said, watching her with pride. "The lady in line said she needs a transplant like Mama's," Sadie informed Darren quietly during the reception. "Will you give a piece of your liver to her too?" Darren smiled, kneeling to be at her level. "Unfortunately, I can only donate once, but the foundation will help her find a donor, just like it helped your mother." "Is that why it's called Stone Clear?" Tessa asked, joining the conversation. "Because it helps people see the way?" "Exactly," Darren confirmed. "Like a stone that reflects light and illuminates the path when everything seems dark." The life settled into a new normal. The mansion, once sterile in its perfection, now pulsed with the signs of a truly lived-in home. Nadine recovered at home, initially occupying one of the guest rooms, but eventually, in a natural evolution no one questioned, moving into the master bedroom with Darren. There were family dinners every night, without exception. Sunday outings to the park where they had their first day without sadness. School events, doctor's appointments, small celebrations of progress. Life was, in many ways, simpler than Darren had ever imagined for himself, and infinitely richer in content. On a particularly sunny spring afternoon, nearly 6 months after the surgery, Darren arrived home to find Nadine and the twins working on a mysterious project in the living room. "You can't look yet," Tessa exclaimed as he entered, running to block his view. "It's a surprise," Sadie explained, firmly guiding him out of the room. "Come back in 10 minutes. When he was finally allowed to return, he found the three standing beside the main bookshelf, clearly proud of whatever transformation they had made. "You can see now," Tessa announced formally. Approaching, Darren immediately noticed what they had created, an elaborate triple frame occupying the central space of the shelf. In the first frame was his mother's letter, carefully preserved under glass, her elegant handwriting visible to anyone who passed by. In the second frame was a photograph he recognized immediately, the photo of the three of them, Nadine and the twins, taken the day they met, when he had come to thank the woman who had prevented him from jumping off that bridge. And in the third frame was a new drawing, clearly made by the twins. 4 figures holding hands under a large yellow sun, each one labeled with names in childish letters: Mama, Darren, Sadie, and Tessa. At the top of the drawing, in colorful letters, Our Family, and at the bottom, a simple phrase that made Darren swallow hard. "Now we have everything." "Do you like it?" Sadie asked, watching his reaction closely. "We had the idea," Tessa added quickly. "Mama only helped with the frame." Darren looked at the three of them, Nadine with her calm smile, the twins practically brimming with anticipation, and felt that now familiar sense of fullness that still surprised him every time he experienced it. "It's perfect," he replied sincerely. "Absolutely perfect." That night, after the twins finally fell asleep, Darren and Nadine sat on the back porch, watching the stars begin to appear in the spring sky. "The girls are right, you know," Nadine said after a comfortable silence. "Now we really have everything." Darren took her hand, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Ironically, I have less now than I did before, materially speaking. A lot went to the foundation." "And yet you have more," she added, understanding. "Infinitely more," he agreed. "Promises of truth," Nadine murmured, almost to herself. "What did you say?" Darren asked, turning to her. "I was thinking that I finally understand what true promises are," she explained. "They're not words. They are actions that keep happening day after day, like being present, like choosing to stay even when it would be easier to leave." Darren reflected on that for a moment. "Like a transplant," he suggested. "A part of you living in another person, growing together." Nadine smiled, squeezing his hand. "Exactly like a transplant." On the bookshelf inside the house, the triple frame caught the last rays of the setting sun, past, present, and future, gathered in one space. The letter that awakened him, the photograph that connected them, and the drawing that promised everything under the simple but profound childlike statement that, ultimately, summed up everything that truly mattered. Now we have everything. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.